Sweet hour of prayer, sweet hour of prayer, that calls me from a world of cares and bids me at my Father's throne, make all my wants and wishes known. In seasons of distress and grief, my soul has often found relief, and oft escaped the tempter's snare by thy return, sweet hour of prayer. Gua yoye kunamata nahi yota komorerwa inohotipa kukumbira kunababa vekutenga kumnandiu kukulera ingatingi ngatutuza nize ngibo nei kaya ngibapele kona kuye by thy return, sweet hour of prayer. Neyo ngua yeku tenda neyo ngua yeku tenda. Amen.
Good evening, viewers. We welcome you back to another edition of the program Health and Mission. Today, joining me is Mrs. Rusinamhodzi Rubete, a clinical social worker and family therapist. Welcome the viewers.
Thank you so much, Elder. Thank you and welcome to our show.
Okay, today we are talking about stress. That's the topic for today. Stress. What is stress? Can you give us the definition of stress?
All right. If I would define stress is a mental health issue, one of the mental health problems or disorders that we have. So when we are talking about stress, it's more of a condition or a feeling that a person experiences when they feel that the resources that they have are less than the demands that are placed on them. So basically it has to do with a person's perception of how the demands that are placed on them are in terms of, in comparison with the demands that they have.
Okay. What causes this stress? So what brings it about? Is it an external factor or is it an internal factor?
All right. Thank you so much for that question. So you realize that when we are looking at stress, which in this case, I suppose we are talking about the negative stress or what we call distress. So when you look at negative stress or distress, it has got a number of causes, but we can group them in two, which is internal causes and external causes. So they can be internal, which is intrapersonal, and they can be external, which is environmental.
Now, you sort of confused me. For the sake of our viewers and myself, what is the difference between stress and distress? You explained very well, but we want you to further elaborate such that it is very clear the distinction between the two.
All right.
Are they different?
Okay, so when we are talking about stress, we've got different types of stress. So the first type of stress that we have is what we call positive or normal stress, which in clinical terms is called eustress. Then the second category is negative stress, which is the one we are more concerned about. In that one, clinically, we call it distress. So that's the same thing that we're talking about.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. What are the effects of this stress on human beings? What are the effects of stress on human beings? Mental health, we're talking about it. Mm-hmm. Does it cause somebody to now go bonkers? They go mad. So anybody who is stressed should go mad. What really happens to a person who now has this stress? Yes.
All right. So when someone has got stress, they suffer a number of effects, which clinically we can group into four broad effects of stress. So the first one would be the physical symptoms or the physical effects of stress. So when someone gets stress, physically they present with a number of symptoms, which include things like body aches and pains. They start feeling pain. It can be in the stomach and the back and the shoulders. Okay. They experience digestive issues or digestive problems, which can include diarrhea, constipation, nausea, vomiting. They can also even have chest pains, rapid heartbeat, among other physical symptoms, and they can have also frequent colds and even loss of sex drive. So these are the physical effects of stress. Then when we move to the emotional effects, yes. When we look at emotionally, we have changes of emotions. To say someone can become moody,
yes.
Someone can become very irritable, someone can have a short temper, feeling agitated, someone can feel overwhelmed, someone can feel lonely or isolated, they can become sad and they can end up being depressed. You know, these are the emotional effects that we see. And then we have the psychological ones.
Yes.
There are also psychological or mental effects of stress. These can include things such as unexplained fear. These can include anxiety or constant worrying. It can include forgetfulness. It can include confusion and things also such as difficulty making decisions. Then the last group of effects that we have are what we call behavioral effects of stress, where we then start seeing differences in the way that the person behaves when they are stressed and when they are not stressed. So behaviorally, you may have someone having problems eating. They can be either eating too little or they can be eating too much because of stress. Yes. The sleep patterns can change. They can either sleep too little or they can sleep too much. People can isolate themselves socially, or some can even become overly social. Then some can neglect or procrastinate their responsibilities, be it work, be it studies and things like that. Some can be nervous. Some can then resort to all of these contemporary issues that we are now seeing, to say the substance abuse, among other things, and even self-harm behaviors.
Before we go for the break, can you quickly tell me the ways in which one can notice that I'm about to get stressed. And maybe you can have an option of running away from it, which was possible. Okay, just tell us, how does a person notice that now I'm about to get into a bout of stress?
All right. Okay, so when you realize that there are issues that are happening in your life, for example, internally, you have internal issues that you are struggling with. It can be guilt, it can be grief, it can be fear, it can be worry. If you realize that it's getting a bit overboard or more than the normal internally, that will show you that you're almost getting stressed.
Yes.
And if you also realize that externally, within your environment, you're having issues, for example, issues in the family, issues in your other interpersonal relationships, in your workplace, at home, and things like that. And these things are really worrying you to the extent that you are now feeling, you know what, the internal and external resources that I have, I don't think I can be able to cope with this. Then you realize you're now almost getting there.
Viewers, stay tuned. We are going for a short break. Stay with us. We are coming for the second segment.
So how's your trip? Was the flight okay? खाना लगा दूं डार्लिंग?
Welcome back, viewers, for the second segment of the program Health and Mission. Today we're talking about mental health, zeroing in on stress. Ms. Rusinamhodzi, rubete. Now, depression, does it come packaged together with stress, or is it a totally different thing together?
All right. Depression is a different mental health disorder, which we would say would be a bit more severe than stress. So depression is when you have actually moved from the stage of stress to getting to a point where you feel hopeless and where you feel helpless. So that is depression. It's a different one, which is a bit more severe than stress.
Okay, now coming to stress, which we are zeroing in today, I wanted to ask on how do we manage this thing? Is the elephant in the room, and for us to push it out, hey, it's tough. So how, from an expert's point of view, how do we do it?
All right. So when we are talking about managing stress, or rather coping with stress, there are different ways that we can use, and there are different types of coping with stress that people often employ. So you realize that at times we have people employing what we call emotion-focused coping mechanisms, whereby people are focusing on activities or things that kind of bring emotional relief to them, so that they feel, you know what, now I don't feel stressed anymore. So this is where you see people doing things that relieve their emotions, like when they are doing things like listening to music. Some people dance, some people eat a lot, some people resort to substance abuse, alcoholism, because it makes them feel better emotionally, you know. Yes, so these are emotion-focused coping mechanisms that people use to cope with stress. Then we have what we then call problem-focused coping mechanisms. But before the problem-focused ones, there are others, especially Adventists, especially Christians. There is also this class that we can call religious coping mechanisms.
All right.
Yes.
I wanted to come on that.
Yes.
Our program is Health and Mission. You will notice that, is it possible to go and manage from a Christian perspective? We always use what Christ said to us when he said, go ye therefore, and when he said, as you go ye therefore, he had already given, say, us a role, especially in the medical missionary aspect, saying cleanse the lepers, heal the sick, and all that. How then can you manage those people who are falling into negative things more when they have stress? How best can we manage those people? Because they are finding coping mechanisms out of what we ourselves might know. How then can we share
All right.
What is the mission of the Christian? You said religious
coping
mechanisms.
Yes.
To a non-believer, to an atheist, and to others, how best can we do?
All right.
Yes.
So speaking of religious coping mechanisms, you realize that this doesn't only affect those who are Christians, because those who are Christians, for example, they've got different religious coping mechanisms that they use. Some of them, they use what we call the plead approach, where they are pleading with God to help them through their situations, and then after that they don't do anything. Then some use what we call what we actually call a collaborative approach, where they are seeing God as a partner who needs to help them resolve their issues. Then some use a self-directing approach to say, God has already given me what it takes for me to solve my problems. So these are different types of religious coping mechanisms that we use. But the most important one, or the one that we encourage as experts, is the collaborative approach. As a Christian, do what you can to deal with your problems while relying on God and also praying to God to help you. But to those who do not believe in God, like what you are saying, in as much as it is actually a disadvantage not to believe in God, because as a family therapist, like what I was saying, I work with a lot of clients presenting with different mental health disorders. I found it easier and better when I'm working with clients who believe in God, because they can use their belief system as a coping mechanism. So for those who don't believe in God, there is then the third cluster of coping mechanisms, which we encourage for all believers or non-believers, which is what we call problem-focused coping mechanisms, where you are now focusing on the problem head on to see what is the problem at hand and what actions can I take for me to be able to resolve my problems. So this is part of what can help us when we are looking at stress management. So the most important thing is to look at the types of coping and see which one is best. So we've looked at emotion-focused, religious coping, and we've also looked at problem-focused. And we are saying we want us to use problem-focused and we want to use religious coping mechanisms which are adaptive or which are healthy. So maybe in closing for this segment, I will just tell you maybe other random and easy ways that we can use to manage stress as individuals. So one of them is to know yourself. Stress takes knowing yourself. What are my strengths as
So you're your own doctor.
Yes, your own doctor. These are mental health issues. Yes. So knowing yourself, what are my strengths as Netsai? What are my weaknesses? This helps me now when I'm navigating life to say this I can take, this I cannot take, so that you don't also overwhelm yourself with things that you can't do or things that are beyond your control.
Also, when you get contentment that these things I cannot manage, that's a healing process in itself.
Yes, it's actually
I wanted to ask something very pertinent as we close this segment. Very quickly, can you highlight whether the mental health or stress does affect the physical? I wanted to just touch on that. Does it in a big way then show externally to say this one, like when someone has got some problems that they can manifest on the skin, in the eyes, wherever, that there's now a problem? Does stress do that?
Yes, stress definitely does that. Stress affects, like what I said earlier on, the different clusters of stress effects. Stress also have physical effects. For example, we have what we actually call psychosomatic illnesses, which are illnesses that are seen on the body or in the physical or the biological, but whose origin are from the mental issues and processes. So it really has a physical effect. Like that's when you can then start seeing, for example, what I was talking about, someone getting body pain, someone getting, the nausea, the diarrhea, someone getting all of these things. So you can actually tell, and even from the appearance of a person, sometimes some people start getting pale, starting losing weight, starting gaining weight a lot, starting looking, all of these things. So you can actually detect physically. Although we must not then always judge to say everyone who is looking this way is because they are stressed.
So we need then to recommend that they get help.
Yes.
Definitely. Thank you. Now, viewers, stay tuned. We are coming back for our third and last segment. Stay tuned.
Papa, did you get my toy?
Don't carry your stress back home.
Welcome back, viewers, to our third and last segment of the program, health and mission. Today we are talking about mental health, zeroing in on stress. Miss Rusinamhodzi Rubete, we are now picking on something that is closer to the people. You spoke about management of stress, and some of the things are a bit out of reach for many people. Now, can you tell us easy management tips for stress which a person can do alone? Can you give us a rundown of those all at once?
All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Elder. Maybe I'll just run down through self-stress management tips that you can use. I talked about knowing yourself, which is something that is critical. Then learning to say no, Elder, is something that is important.
No to what?
Sometimes we get stressed because we are accepting so many responsibilities
that we can manage.
So that ends up stressing us.
Yes.
So sometimes we need to learn to say no. Sometimes we also need to avoid the stress where possible. Yes. So if it's something that I can avoid, a person, a situation that I can avoid, I need to avoid the stressor. You also need even to escape or leave the situation where it's possible. You need also to learn that sometimes there are things that you can't control. Don't try to control the uncontrollable. It will end up stressing you more.
So the no is more of a let go. Yes, because many people even commit suicide because of relationships. Because they cannot, amongst all the flowers that God has created, that one flower can be a stressor to one man or to a woman, and they end up committing suicide.
Definitely. So this also involves relationships where it is needful. Leave if you have to protect your sanity and your mental health.
Toxic relationships.
Then you should also learn to be more assertive in life. If your yes is your yes, let it be a yes. If it's a no, be assertive in life. Then you should also learn to express and to explore your feelings. So when you are feeling something towards someone, or when you need to communicate something, learn to express your feelings so that you are not bottling them up. Then you also need to be willing to compromise at times, especially in interpersonal issues. You can't always have things your way. It can end up stressing you. Where there is need to compromise, learn to compromise. Then time management, Elder, is also very important. Learn to also manage your time, because failure to manage time at times ends up getting us in situations where we feel overwhelmed emotionally.
You've been rushing.
You're always rushing. You're always having tension. You're always failing to meet deadlines. All of these things lead to stress. So time management is important. Then avoiding hot button topics. Sometimes with your loved ones, sometimes some of the stresses that we have, they are necessary. We can avoid them. Then trimming down your to-do list. Don't have so many things to do. You're not a super person. You're not a superman. You're not superwoman. So sometimes you need to trim your to-do list. And even when it comes to buying, we are now living in a consumeristic society. You need to also to trim your to-buy list, because these things can overwhelm you.
These things are impulsive.
And they end up stressing.
Compulsive tendencies. OCDs comes into play. This one. Obsessive compulsive disorders can also be stressors. Wonderful.
Then adjusting your standards in life. Learn to also adjust your standards. If you're too much of a perfectionist, it can end up stressing you. Then in life, learn to look at the bigger picture. Sometimes we focus on the one thing that's going wrong and forget all the good things, and we get stressed. Share your feelings with someone, a friend, a family member, a therapist. Have a social support network, friends and family who can be able to help you in situations. And maybe the last one, and maybe the last one that I'll talk about, this one I'll zero in on family therapy. But you need also to connect with others, doing things that you enjoy, your hobbies, having a sense of humor, even if you're a Christian and even if you're an elder. Learning to.
Normally we elders,
you're very serious people.
Formal and serious.
Yet having a sense of humor can be mediating factor. Learn to also forgive people in relationships. Learn not to revenge. Go for walks, physical exercise. It helps you. Adapting a healthy overall lifestyle, and also being more prayerful and having faith and trust in God. I think these basically can be self-help strategies.
Tips. All right. As we are closing, I wanted you to touch on something that is very important. there's nobody who just came from nowhere. Everybody comes from a family setup. Even if you are alone,
Yes.
you belong to a family. It can be a church family. It can be from the biological family. It can be from the work family.
Yes.
How do families, but particularly in this case, we are talking about the biological family, the mother, father, children. How do people, how do they act as stress absorbers? Are they, can we say, sanctuaries for people who are stressed externally to say, come home and rest?
All right.
Or are they are minefields themselves as far as stress is concerned? Say, how can people manage stress at home? And how can we take our own, who we know is stress, into the family setup?
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much for that question on the role of the family when it comes to mental health and when it comes to stress as well. So when we're looking at the role of the family, it can be twofold. You know, one, the family can actually be a source of stress, be it the individuals in the family or the family environment itself. You know, so the one who may be causing the stress can be your spouse. It can be your child. So the family members can actually be.
So work is better, school is better.
That is where you see people spending more hours at work than they are hard working. You know?
Give me overtime.
Yes, because they are avoiding the stress.
Okay.
Or the home environment itself can be stressful. To say it can be a child, but the parents are always fighting and things like that. So the family can be a source of stress.
Stress, yes.
Then secondly, it can actually be a resource. Instead of being a source, it can be a resource where someone can actually end up.
How does it become a resource? We want to correct, because right now we are noticing that divorces are on the rise.
Definitely.
How best can we manage, especially during the time of COVID? It was terrible.
Yes.
It was terrible. They went up because people cannot live with each other. They stress each other. How best can we say, as we are about to close, we want to touch it such that we expand it in just a nutshell. How can we make each other welcome at home? Be it the mother, making sure the children, the father are both welcome. Making sure that the mother is welcome at home.
All right, thank you for that question. So that brings us to the family as being a resource when it comes to stress management and issues to do with coping. So when we are now talking about that issue, so what we need to do as families is to say we need to make sure that we provide social support, psychosocial support to our family members.
Okay.
So let's learn to be there for each other socially. Let's learn to be emotionally available. So I've seen a lot of parents who go all out to provide a lot for their children, to take them to expensive schools and all these things, but they are not there emotionally and they are not there socially in their life. So let's be there for each other socially and emotionally, and also where possible, let us do practical actions that can actually help the other person to cope with their issues. If they need financial help, if they need material help, if they need just your being there, let's learn to do that. And in our interpersonal relationships, let's try to do our best to be good to each other, to be kind to each other, in the way that we relate. If it's the husbands, let's learn to love our wives. If it's the wives, let's learn to submit, let's learn to respect, let's learn, if it's the children, let's learn to obey. So when we are sticking by these family principles that we have based from the scriptures, you realize that we would have lesser interpersonal relationship problems within our families. So we need to do our responsibilities or to play our roles as family members so that we each play a part towards making our home a beautiful home, a conducive environment, a stress-free zone, and a place where someone can actually run to as they have a safe place so that they are able to heal from their issues. And above all, I will not undermine the point that where there is need for professional help, let us engage professionals. Let's go for professional counseling. For therapy, we can use the professionals, counselors, clinical social workers, clinical psychologists, among family therapists, among other professionals, so that at least we really get help.
Thank you. Before you give us, in closing, your Jesus factor in your profession,
yes,
you are going to give us a Jesus factor.
Definitely.
Yes. Can you tell us? I like reading a lot, and I read in one article that sometimes some stresses can go away by just having a person listening to you.
Yes.
Just listening. They come and tell without providing any counseling, without being elaborate or giving an example of how it happened to somebody, it came to pass, just listening. Is it true? Because I read about it.
Okay.
And they say it's true. Just listening and a person goes away. Is it a healing tool? Or that's hogwash, that's absolutely right.
That is not a myth, it's very
It's
true.
true.
It's very
Yes.
true, especially when it comes to stress. Having someone who just listens
Listens
to
to
you,
you.
who just gives you a listening ear
Okay.
is very important. For example, in therapy, there is what we call catharsis, there is what we call emptying talk therapy. In all that, what we are simply doing is to provide a listening ear to our clients.
Okay.
And when they are talking to us and we are listening, they are emptying, they are coming in touch with their issues, with their emotions, and as that is happening, that is how the process of healing takes place. So the same applies to the Jesus factor. When you then tell it all to Jesus, when you then talk to Jesus about your things and about your issues, you are actually also in the process of healing. And the good thing about Jesus is he has all power and he has all solutions. So he just doesn't listen, for the sake of listening, for the sake of providing a listening ear, but he also listens so that he can help us. So may God help us that we may also make use of that resource that we have, which is our belief system, which is belief in Christ, and he will help us through.
Wonderful. That's amazing. Thank you very much, Mrs. Anetsai Rusinamhodzi, rubete, our guest for today. We hope to have you on another edition of Health and Mission. I think you will be willing to come back another time.
I would be, thank you.
Thank you, viewers. We meet you in another segment. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, goodbye.
Yes.